This is your organization, which is called your life. You are somebody's partner, right? That's for sure. You work somewhere, and this is one of your roles. You are somebody's parent, possibly. You are a member of some community, definitely you're American, maybe of some other as well, and you have free time. We could also say that you are here, added, somebody's child, correct? That's for sure. So now, let me think about this. If I am married to Iliana, that's her name, and I am her husband, I should be husband, she should be wife. Can it happen that sometimes she, instead of being my wife, she becomes my mother? Can happen. If she becomes my mother, who do I become? Her child. If I'm her child, we have two parallel universities, two parallel realities. In the first reality, she is my wife and I am her husband. This is official. But psychologically, she's my mother and I'm her son. When it comes to communication style, this will change, right? Yeah. Because mother communicates differently with her son. So let's say I go outside. I work in a different country. And she calls me every day and says, "Did you eat breakfast today?" If she does it, and I answer the question, what has to happen to my self-esteem? Well, think about this.
As a son or as a husband?
What's this?
Is your mother asking or is your wife asking?
See, this is precisely what happens in the brain. Is it still mother or is it still wife? And the brain gets two messages which are contradictory. And remember that even if we say that she's officially my wife, but she behaves as if she was my mother, the brain gets the message, she's my mother. There's a Chinese saying which says the following: if it walks like a chicken, talks like a chicken, behaves like a chicken, it must be a chicken, not a duck that is pretending, right? So here's the point. If talks like a mother, if walks like a mother, if dresses like a mother, must be my mother. What happens to an adult man who's an entrepreneur, who every day listens to the question, "Did you eat breakfast today?" Well, of course, confused is one thing. If I ask you a question, do you know how to read? It's not only that I can confuse you, there's an insult in it as well. So if she asks him, "Did you eat breakfast?" and he's a CEO of a company, and he manages big problems and solves certain issues, then also the message is, you are not good enough to make your own breakfast. Of course she will say, "I worry about him, that's why." Well, it's not only about worrying, it's about how behavior is executed. This in psychology is called castration, by the way. Right? So here comes the issue, and we will play with it, and you're gonna love it. At the same time, you're gonna hate it, especially if you do it. But let's stick to the fact that we're enlightened and everyone else outside is not. We love that hypocrisy, don't you? Right? So, what kind of behaviors of women towards their partners, husbands, boyfriends, spouses, you know that are of mother quality? I give you one example. Did you eat breakfast? What other do you know when your woman becomes your mother?
Ready. Pick up your clothes.
Pick up your clothes. This is interesting. From beautiful age regressed Logan gets it. Perfect. What else?
Take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself. What else?
Did you take out the trash?
Oh, for example, could be. What else? Well, how do adult women treat their husbands or boyfriends as their children or sons? How specifically? What kind of behaviors do they have? How about remember? Remember to take warm clothes. It's cold where you're going. Right? What else? How interesting. Let's then for a while get sick. A man has a fever. What happens? Besides, men don't have fever. They destroy Zika and Ebola virus in one moment. Why are you laughing? What's happening? Are you telling me that he has tantrums, being age regressed, about a silly fever that is going to go away in a couple of hours? No, these are not tantrums. I think he's destroying HIV, Ebola and Zika virus in one body in the very same moment. What does she do if she has another behavior in this moment?
Takes care of it.
How? How do you take care of a man who's adult? Because one thing is I can tell you, you'll be fine. This is adult way of taking care. But another thing is I can hug you, especially here, and say, oh my dear boy, everything will be fine. Both behaviors have consequences.
Yeah.
The first one, you'll be fine, habituates him to believing himself. The second,
Babies him.
and therefore he becomes what she's
Exactly.
creating.
Yeah.
This would be number one candidate to be betrayed,
Yeah.
because he won't be respected. He started being an alpha male. This kind of situation happens constantly, and especially in cultures where role of a woman is perceived and defined by being in a personality of a mother constantly. Let's move to another one and see this is cultural. When does a man treat his woman like his daughter rather than his life partner? Can you give me some examples with that? Okay, there's no examples, I understand. Never do it. Tell me.
Wanting to pay for everything?
One. This would be one. What else? Oh boy, what
When
a
he makes-
topic we have. You
When
don't
he makes
realize that, do you?
decisions without asking.
Bravo, that would be one. How about she comes and says, I feel bad. She wants to be listened to. What will great majority of men do rather than listen? Of course, give advice. When they give advice, what happens to her self-esteem? Who gives advice? Or people who know better. If she takes advice from her husband, she has to lower her self-esteem. This is destructive for her relationship. This is why she takes advice from her friends, girlfriends, or from external consultants that she pays money to. But if she gets it from her husband, the relationship, which should be equal, just changes. And this is how habitually and gradually she goes into something that Seligman in psychology in 1993 called learned helplessness. She's unable to make decisions on her own, and later when he's gone for a week or so, suddenly she wakes up and she can do everything independently. But later when he's gone, just like you press a button, honey, what do you think? Is it interesting for you? Realize what's going on. Realize it's interesting. This matrix shows you what the name of the road is, where and when you decide to use it, what kind of relations will be there, what kind of personality is okay, what kind of goals are necessary in this road, what kind of breath it should have, which activities it will do, and which activities are not necessary. And to do that, I will use myself as an example. Not because I want to tell you what you should put inside, but to tell you how I created all these roles. And I consider this exercise and this process, it's more than exercise, it's the whole strategy of creating a company called you. I consider this process to be the most important that led me to where I am in my life. This is husband. This is his wife. And this is, I will tell you about my role of the husband. You don't know it, by the way. Only she knows it. Because she is the only person who has access to husband. Me in the role of a husband. Why is this fundamental? Out of a very simple reason. 10 years ago, I made a choice that I'm going to be monogamous. And to do that, I had to create a strategy for monogamy. Otherwise, I would have all my biology against me. It's a simple fact, and I'm a scientist. I know that, what is it? Spermians, is it? The small guys that...
Sperm.
In sperm, 90%, and the small guys, what are the names?
Spermatozoa.
Spermatozoas, okay. 90% of them are called soldiers. Their mere task is to kill the others. We're not monogamous biologically, but it doesn't mean that it's good for me. Just the opposite, it would destroy my relationship. So I decided that my wife is going to be the only person in this world that I consider a sexual being. All the other women are asexual to me. Is it helpful? Yes, totally, because when I work with them, they can be as beautiful celebrity as you wish. It will never influence me. Is it good for my wife? Oh yeah, she's very happy about that. Because the only way for a husband to relate with anyone is with his wife. There's no other way. You will never see me sexual towards other women. I eliminated it. Another aspect. Where and when does he appear? At home, when he's dating her. By the way, how many people, when they are married, they date? What do you think? No, not many. 67% date every 7 months or less in the US. People who are married don't date in this country. Why?
Tired.
I-
Overworked.
Oh, this is a justification. Fantastic. This is a justification. I can tell you why. Because they never planned it. They never put this into activities of what it means to execute marriage. They simply said, we're going to get married, it will be fine. Imagine that you open a company, you start business and you say, it will be fine. Because marriage is so horribly underestimated and so reactively managed that people don't realize that it's not enough to act in it only when it goes wrong. Oddly enough, they run businesses in a completely different manner. And I can give you different research which supports the idea that if marriage works fine, you make more money. There's even research which shows that a man reaches his peak potential between the age of 40 and 65, and it directly correlates to the fact that he's with one woman. Focus, gentlemen, focus. It's as simple as that. It's pure mathematics. So, holidays, family, and bed. Contact via telephone or SMS. 1 to 2 times a day, date once a week, conversation 15 minutes a day. Being together during a week, minimum 7 hours. Why would I do this in such an artificial, organized, robotic way? For instance, to remember to call her at least once a day. Why?
Creates the behavior.
Because it creates a habit. Do you know people who, when they think about being together, they cannot remember the last time they had a conversation? Because I know them. There are two ghosts who actually happened to get married long time ago, and they pass themselves in the corridor, in the room, and they go, how are the kids? Everything's fine. And they go to sleep. Sometimes they can have sex, they think about someone else, and that's pretty much it. This is not a high standard of marriage. If you want a high standard of marriage, you need to create yourselves as wives and husbands. And the wife that you are, or a husband that you are, stems from your culture, which told you that this is the way it should be. So I asked myself a question, what kind of husband do I want to be? And I created this bloke. I created him. I made myself up. And this is this product. I'm much more than being a husband, but the husband that I made has been functioning for 10 years, and we're doing fine.
Did you have to make a wife version of this?
I did not, because that would be
No, her.
manipulating my wife.
No, did she do one?
Yes, after a long time, when she finally realized that this was congruent. People will not change unless you do. And so much blame in relationship that goes on, it's simply unbelievable how we think that only if the second person changes, magically we will be happy. Trust me, this will not change. So once you create yourself, then the other person can change themselves. If they do or not, it's a different story, but finally, possibility exists. So I created a personality that is safe, faithful, straightforward, friendly, and inspiring. I set the goals. It's fascinating that people make vision and mission and goals for the companies, right? How come they don't do it for marriage? Then why? Why to get married? Well, because of love. I didn't say why. I said why you got married. I say what for? What did you get married for? Well, it's because of love. If you do business out of love, are you going to make money? Not necessarily. If you get married out of love, is it enough? Well, for the first 2 years maybe. Good luck later when you start quarreling, if love is going to help you. The magical notion of power, therapeutic power of love, is so over-evaluated that it's impossible. I had so many women coming to me saying, my husband is an alcoholic. I go, why don't you divorce him? He says, because if I only loved him enough, then he would change. 15 years gone, down the drain. Happens constantly, because a romantic model, which is characteristic for the Europeans, I believe also for the Americans, says that love makes the world go round. Well, not necessarily. I think it's also money, I think it's also culture, I think it's also IT, programming, and Facebook right now. I think there's many things that make the world go round. So, our goal was to build a relationship that is supracultural, supragenderal, a relationship that integrates versatility of human based on love and awareness. Simply because she was born in a different culture than I was, we had to create ourselves outside of the culture, because Mexican model of wife is based either on being a mother or being a daughter. And I didn't want that. You want age regressed behavior of women? Husbands, what do you think? Can my mother visit us on the weekends? Now husband goes into being a father, but if he goes into being a father, then he has competition with her father. Just like my wives who become mothers, they compete with mothers-in-law. Now we have two mothers, but only one is original. For his mother, he's always going to be Freddy. It's not that he's an alcoholic, he just has temporal problems. For you as a wife, he's Fred, an adult man, but not for his mother. You understand what's going on? There's two contradictory images, two contradictory personal brands. And if you're a mother for him, you will pay the price of competing with your mother-in-law, and you will always lose because she loves him unconditionally. You don't. It's a fascinating, yes please.
So two quick questions. One
Yes.
is, so since your wife is your customer or user, how much input did you get when you were creating this from her? And the second is, how often do you update it?
Perfect. I update it more or less every 3 months. This is where I noticed that the update itself is maybe 1 or 2% of changes. Usually when it comes to the word stop, where I notice there's some negative behavior that I will decide to work on. And when it comes to the first one, once I did it, it took me a couple of months to introduce it so that I would be congruent with it, because it's artificial always at the very beginning. And later on, she followed because she realized that it was more effective to use this model rather than to use certain cultural models that came from the past, right? So this self-creation is based on the premise of figuring out what kind of husband you'd like to be, rather than leaving it to an unconscious process that stems from childhood, because this is where we get our models of husbands from, right? I believe that love is made rather than only felt.
Yeah.
So I know that if I decide to love you as my students, I not necessarily have to hug you, but I can be gentle, I can give you knowledge, and I can train you and push you so that you change. My wrestling coach is not nice or kind to me, but he loves me by beating me up. I wouldn't like the same model for my daughter, right? Because love changes from one personality to another. So, by giving it goals and needs, amazing things started to happen. Because if your children use you as an example of the couple, and they have to, they have no other choice, they have better chances of being happy in the marriage later on. Now pay attention. There's a 60% growth in divorce when one of the parents was divorced for the children. This is only the beginning. Do you know what the growth of divorce is and the ratio of divorce, how much it rises when two grandparents from mother sides and father sides divorced? 640%. What does this mean? That divorce is modeled and copied. It's a fact. So it's important for you to understand that if you divorce, you better get this right, or your children will. Not because they were going to be unhappy, because this is the only thing that they know, Remember, humans learn by repetition. This is how it goes, by modeling. So I know what's going to motivate me when it comes to my relationship. The fact that I don't want my child to make my mistakes. At the same time, they have to, unless you change. You cannot possibly smoke a cigar and tell smoking is bad. You really have to stop. And then you will be congruent, okay?